moves your business into a higher gear, moves you into service to more people, right? Brings more cash flow to you and to your family, ultimately to your heirs, right? You're increasing your estate by prospering. And that's what I'm trying to accomplish here at the David Tulis Show. Trying to give more value to you as my listener. And of course, my real job is to run commercials. That's what I do. I run ads. That's what I love to do, to help all of our local businesses here because they want you to shop there, go there, buy there, end up there for service, like Christian Brothers Automotive, for example, and many of the places that are here on Nooga Radio 92.7 FM, and also at our powerful digital station 95.3 FM HD4. HD means high definition, and that's a sub channel of 95.3, the music station here in Chattanooga. We're channel 4 on the digital side, somewhat under promoted venue, but we're there reaching out 60 miles from our tower atop Signal Mountain. And I'm the blogger with the biggest pen, and argue that you should love your neighbor and buy local. It is an argument. Localism is an argument that has some serious faults. Okay, and I admit them, and they're the same faults that Donald Trump has, because he is a nationalist, right? He's a nationalist and has a prejudice for the nation state, the United States, in the same way that I have a prejudice for Chattanooga and Hamilton County. But I think mine is more excusable. It's more humane. It operates really on a closer scale to where you are, and it doesn't have the imperial pretensions and the death toll that the national version, the large scale version, the mass version has, as expressed by President Trump with his steel tariff, right, excluding our neighbors and then our neighbor Canada in one other country. Now I'm trying to bring benefit to you on the program. It's 800-8949, 800-8949, and I'm trying to get at something that is perhaps an elusive topic, and that is our subservience to pettifogging rules and regulations by people who are administrators, right? Those are bureaucrats. We are a people who has lost our way, and we're not the great race that we once were. And now I say these things with the issue of slavery aside. Okay, the issue of slavery is aside. Americans in the 1830s and 1840s, the slavery question aside, had many great things about them, but they were a people under judgment and facing judgment because they held strangers and aliens in chattel slavery intended to be perpetual, and had many thousands of blacks at that time rented out. When you are a slave in the rental system, you were chewed up and ground down by the master who had hired you. He may have rented you from a church that had a passel of slaves that were an investment asset, right? That was, many churches had that. Christian churches holding black men and women, dividing up their families, and enduring and overlooking, not enduring, but overlooking their grief, continual grief as slaves working in the fields. And at the end of the rental period, when the slaves were restored after the season, they came back emaciated, many of them dead, weakened, not cared for. The renter of them, having no concern for their welfare. That was the worst kind of chattel slavery, the rental markets. And then after the war, even then, there was a continuation of slavery by other means. You would be arrested, and then you'd be sold by the sheriff to a farmer or to a corporation, and then you were arrested on some phony charge, public disorder, right, vagrancy, rules and statutes that we would say now are unconstitutionally vague and should have been overthrown. They were in effect in those times. Even to the 1910s and the 1920s, there were forms of slavery, particularly in the South. So these things aside, there was in the American character in the 1830s and 40s a kind of independence, which Alexis de Tocqueville, in his book Democracy in America, describes in great detail. I mean, it's a very readable history and review of the heart and mind of the American people. Now, here in Chattanooga, I mentioned that kind of as an aside. I wanted to have a quick review, in case you were not paying attention to the news cycle. A quick review of 3 points of liberty in Chattanooga that are worth considering. We are trying to create new value in Chattanooga, and we want there to be more liberty rather than less, more freedom rather than less. And that's because in an era of freedom, when there's freedom, more is produced and unleashed are all the best things of human nature. That would be innovation, invention, risk-taking. When you have a culture of fear, which is what we have now, we have a culture that is so full of fear at every point. It's so lacking in daring, so lacking in protest, if you will, that our long-term demise as a people, and certainly as a nation, is very clear. These are things that are bad news, perhaps. But my analysis here on the David Tulis Show at 92.7 FM is that there are good things in it. There are good things in the collapse of a bad system, or of a bad culture that has rearranged itself into a mass system, which is what we have. It's called commercial government, and we have commercial government at every turn. And though Americans lead the world still in some, not in every field, but in many fields, it is a world leader and an innovator. The speed of innovations, the speed of prosperity is greatly slowed down, and we are at a point right now where the bubble is about to burst, the bubble in the equities markets, and there is going to be a sharp reversal ahead in the financial sector, which is to say the debt market. You have equities in the secondary market, which pretend to be assets, but they're just cash generating pieces of paper that give dividends, right? Many don't, of course, but some do. And there are players in the debt markets that come in, like Mitt Romney, who was one of those financial vultures, would swoop in on a company, saddle it with debt, and then sell the company, and then it collapses. That's what's happening to the Toys R Us business, in which 30,000 people will be losing their job with many billions of dollars in debt for just selling plastic toys made in China. That's largely what that company did, is selling plastic junk from China, and with billions of dollars in debt put upon it by the corporate raiders who are there to rescue the business, right? And make their 40 or 50% profit using debt, right? Debt, of course, is so cheap today with the artificial suppression of the interest rate by the Federal Reserve System that everybody can do it. Everybody is involved in corporate raiding, and then many other companies that are not subject to the corporate raiders are buying back their shares, and that's another interesting thing. They're buying back shares from the public to keep, and the effect is to keep up the value. So you have these inflationary benefits, these props, if you will, under the Dow and the S&P and the other indices that are part of that whole larger story of using debt to make yourself rich. And we are at the end of that period, more or less. And I'm not optimistic. And so my goal here on the David Tulis Show is to just give you, as I can, looking at the news headlines and seeing how the idea of liberty works. If you have more liberty, you're going to have more. If you live out what the Bible promises, right? If you live out the culture that's commanded by God in the Bible, you're going to have more prosperity. You'll have more, and you have that because you have more freedom, and in that freedom, you have less fear. You cannot have freedom and fear together. They simply don't go together. If you have fear, if you're always fearing getting written up by your principal because you take part in a protest, if you're always fearing that an armed man will come into your school and mow down people, there is a lot that just can't simply happen. It can't happen in the mind and heart of the individual And if you look at the mass of students, you have schools that have hundreds of students in them. The effect of the mass upon the mass, right? The mass upon the individual is debilitating. These are debilities of human character that we cannot take risks. We just cannot take risks. And school is a training ground for risk avoidance. School is the training ground here in Chattanooga and Helena County for safety. If safety is your concern, and if you can't do things because you want to be safe, then in your callings, right, in your particular callings, whether it's in the medical field or software, or maybe you're a businessman and you want to get a new product on the market, you've got your training in high school, you've got your diploma. The things that you should be doing in your field are going to be harder to arrive at. They're harder to arrive at because you haven't done things independently of the herd. You are part of the herd, and you cannot really see yourself as separating from it. You are there because this is the way we do things, right? We are bound by these problems. Now, Chattanooga City Council has three things that I wanted to mention that touch on liberty. They touch on the panhandling ordinance that is debated in the council Tuesday, and it first came up as a concept by Police Chief David Roddy 2 Tuesdays back, and was not on the agenda this past Tuesday, but was certainly on the heart and mind of many people, largely from the liberal wing, the socialist fruity wing of Christianity. There is that, and that would be the Junction group down on Bailey Avenue, and that the question is now: will the city will some member of the council actually put into writing the change in the ordinance that would expand the jurisdiction of police to enforce panhandling beyond the current limited locations? Right now, the touristy areas of downtown are under this prohibition, an ordinance that gives police authority to arrest people for panhandling, which is to say begging for alms. That, for example, the block in which the aquarium is found. David Roddy would like that to be expanded to the whole city, giving new arrest powers, new threat powers, new coercive powers for the protection, not just now of the visitors to Chattanooga, but the residents. We now can have protection from the poor by the police department. There already exists, as one of those speaking after the official meeting Tuesday said, we already have in Title 39 a ban on aggressive panhandling, and that I would say that that prohibition is clear. That statute is clear, unlike the disorderly conduct statute, which is very vague. It's unconstitutionally vague, but is used all the time as a harassing charge by Neil Pinkston and his attorneys. The ordinance, the statute on aggressive panhandling says basically that you can't touch the person, you can't touch your mark, you can't put your hands on the mark. That's to say the victim, right? The panhandler's victim. You can't block his path, and you can't call after him or call to this person repeatedly for money or gifts after that person has indicated with some clarity that you are not welcome and you're not going to get anything from me. That is the sum of the rule. That is what protects you, right? And yet the opponents of this change all denounce that as ungodly, and that is something that is in view before the council. The council members really didn't give any indication of how the members thought about the proposal and how they really were taking the comments made by about a dozen, maybe more than a dozen people on Tuesday night. And we have a story about that at yournews.com. Yournews.com. Go to my sponsor here on the David Tulis Show, yournews.com, and make sure that you're in the Chattanooga window. And you can read, if you go to the local page, you'll see my story. One of the first times I'd say that I've beaten the Time Free Press, which had a story by Judy Walton in today's editions. And she covers the same ground, citing and quoting the various opponents of this measure. So that is a that is an oppressive scheme that the police would like to have, one more oppressive scheme that the police would like to have in their favor for the public good. Okay. Now, there's a second matter that I want to give a favorable report on, and it comes from a chat that I had with Donna Williams, who is involved in economic development. She says that the city has just now engaged the surveillance company that will be surveilling people who are Airbnb and short-term vacation rental property owners who are advertising their properties, their houses and apartments on Airbnb and like networks. This is an ordinance that was passed creating an unconstitutional district for Airbnb and disallowing Airbnb type relationships in the free market outside the district. So this was passed by I'm trying to remember now when that was. I'd have to check Nooganomics.com for the dates, but it was late last year, I think maybe October. And the ordinance went into effect, and it's unconstitutional because it creates arbitrary and capricious distinctions among like parties, and that is simply unlawful to do. Why Wade Hinton, who is an attorney, would allow such a thing and not absolutely prohibit it as illegal is beyond me. After all, he does represent the judicial system. He is an officer of the court. And why, in the employ of the city, he did not exercise his judicial ethic to warn the council against the move that its members followed, I don't know. I can't really say that. I'm not sure that he could be called up on ethics charges under the judicial rules. But on the other hand, one could say more plainly that the advice he gave allowing it and not warning against it is bad advice. It's bad advice because it is an oppressive measure. It's simply oppressive. You have something, the city council passes something that's illegal, hoping that by bluff and deception, people will obey it. Right? That's how government in many ways works today. It works that way on the national level, on the state level, and also by very, very fine people. Ken Smith on the city council approving this measure. Then we all agree that we can just throw things out there that are lawless, and if they work well, and no one challenges the measure, well, it works. See, that's how it works. You have a kind of bluff system, and why did Mayor Burke not object to this ordinance? Because after all, he is the chief executive of the gig city, the internet city, right? Here we have a city that's lauded around the world, that is touted in Governing Magazine, right? It's touted in the Wall Street Journal. Even favorable treatment by travel writers who spend a few days here talking to people in the Edney building about what a great city is, an internet-connected city, a highly, highly advanced city with environmental pretension and good people, small scale, but making itself seen on the world stage for the David Crockett environmental theme of the 80s and 90s, redevelopment downtown, and now the gig city. Well, how, if you're the mayor, would you accept an ordinance that makes war on the gig concept, that raises a Beijing wall around the city and says the internet cannot come in here? We cannot have the internet providing this service, Airbnb rentals, to a large part of Chattanooga. But if you're inside our arbitrary district, well, there we'll let you have your Airbnb rental house, and you can stimulate local economy all you want. But if you're outside the district, well, sorry, we're going to have Donna Williams come after you. But the good news is, in this part 2 of this survey of Chattanooga city government, the good news is that Donna Williams, perhaps because she's heard about my analysis of res judicata, the legal point of res judicata, that maybe she's been slow on her feet, slow to begin enforcement, because enforcement of this rule would simply be unconstitutional and illegal and could be rebuffed. And I asked her, I said, well, how many enforcement actions are there? She said, well, she didn't know. Has enforcement action begun? Are there any cases in court? I asked her. Well, she didn't think so. And she said that the contract has just been let on the surveillance company that will be spying out people who are illegally using the internet in the gig city to have illicit and unlawful and civilly sanctionable private dealings with people on the internet using Airbnb and like platforms. We are the Gig City, and we will not have anybody using the internet improperly. We, the Gig City, will allow only people in our special sacrosanct district to use the internet for the purpose of having a short-term vacation rental. And if you, sir, are on the wrong side of the street, you see, because our district has a line that goes right down the middle of your street. The man on the other side of you, he's in the district. He's okay. His city council person won approval to be in the district. But you, I'm so sorry, you are out of luck. You cannot rent your house out on Airbnb. You better not become a member of Airbnb. You better not pay the dues and fill out the forms and have your name on that form or on that forum or any other. No, sir. No, sir. I think that Mayor Andy Burke did not put a stop to this tomfoolery is a sign. I mean, he is a leader, right? We call the mayor the chief executive. He executes things, right? The executive, the executor. He makes things happen. He is the head. He is the point. He is the moving party. He is the man of action, as he should be, right? That's what chief executives do. They decide things, right? They take perilous risks. They make decisions. Sometimes their boards throw them out. Sometimes the shareholders approve big pay raises because they've done so well. That's what the chief executive does. And we wonder why the mayor has not shot this thing down as violative of the spirit of the Gig City and hurting people. But Donna Williams is slow on the draw, and perhaps you want to know what res judicata is. Well, here's what that means. Res judicata is the doctrine that once something is decided by a court or a judge, it cannot be redecided, right? You can't go over it. You can't go over it again. And this legal concept touches on the toothless fines that are appended to the ordinance. The ordinance pretends that if you get fined $50, if it ever makes it to court, if it ever makes out of the letter writing exchange, part of the conflict, right, between a free market homeowner and the city, if it ever goes to court, that res judicata says that the $50 fine, in fact, cannot be applied for each day the violation occurs. It can't be. And you know why? Because in one case, if the city files a case on Monday and 5 months later on a Monday, the case is decided against the homeowner, there's a $50 fine. Well, the homeowner cannot be harassed by that particular case again. The city, to get the offense of the next day put before the docket or put on the docket, has to file a separate case. And every day that person is out of compliance requires a separate lawsuit. Clearly an untenable possibility. So the city has effectively a toothless enforcement system of $50, and it will pretend that it can levy the fine every day, but it really can't because of res judicata. That's an old legal doctrine that is on your side. David Tulis.
Traffic, news, and information. Nooga Radio. Digital